with former Deputy Assistant Secretary of State during the Obama administration, Joel Rubin. He's also the author of the briefing book on Substack. Joel, great to see you as always.
You too, Boris.
So Witkoff calling them constructive talks, the prisoner exchange. How do you see it?
Look, the negotiations need to see an American presence that is strong and tough. President Trump needs to get tougher, quite frankly, for Steve Witkoff to be effective at the table. It's wonderful to have the prisoner exchange. That should never be looked askance, but that's not a replacement for a negotiated end to this war. And I just fear that we're allowing the Russians to continue to leg it out, and Vladimir Putin continues to avoid any harsh penalties from the United States while he continues to kill many Ukrainians on the ground.
So the recent announcement of this deal with Modi to reduce oil purchases from Russia, and the U.S. seeming to chase down these unnamed Russian tankers with oil on them from around the world, is that not significant enough?
You know, Boris, it's nibbling at the edges. For example, there is a bill right now sitting in the Senate that would quintuple the sanctions on Russia. It's a bipartisan bill. It has over 80 co-sponsors, and the president doesn't want to move on it. He says, no, I don't need that. I can resolve this. Remember, he said he could resolve it in a day, and that 24-hour clock has long since passed. He needs to get tough on Putin. Putin's seen, and this is remarkable, 1.2 million casualties over the last 4 years of Russians. So it's clear he doesn't seem to worry about Russian casualties. So we need to make him feel real pain, because the casualties don't matter to him.
When it comes to the nuclear treaty with the U.S. that expired today, the Kremlin seems fairly concerned about this. They've talked about taking steps to sort of mitigate any national security threats. Trump basically said if it expires, it expires. He doesn't seem quite as concerned. Yeah,
that New START treaty really provided guardrails for strategic stability between us and Russia for a number of years. And it, of course, its antecedent started in the late 80s, the START treaty. It's in our national security interest to have strategic stability. We need insight into the Russian arsenal. Right now, we're losing it. I'm not necessarily worried about Russia building up its nuclear arsenal. It doesn't have the resources for that. But we need to know what they have. We need to monitor them effectively. And by not having this treaty, we're losing that. And we're losing also global confidence in arms control treaties writ large. And there's China just over the horizon. We need to get them in a treaty, too.
I was actually about to ask you about China, because they weren't part of the New START treaty. And notably, they're also one of the largest purchasers in the world of Russian oil. And President Trump had a conversation with President Xi just a few days ago. It doesn't seem like the U.S. is very eager to put pressure on Xi when it comes to Russia.
You know, this is the crux of the problem, is that President Trump does not want to find avenues that put the pressure on. And when it comes to China, we have a muddled policy. I got to say, I'm confused, quite frankly, about what President Trump is trying to do with China. He might go out there in a couple of months. What's his agenda going to be? Is it going to be opening up markets for American exports? Is it going to be curtailing their nuclear program? Is it going to be putting pressure on Russia? We don't really know. And so these ins and outs with China, in particular related to nuclear issues we've just described, there's a lot of uncertainty and not a lot of clarity about how we get to a better end state.
Aside from Nicolás Maduro being an authoritarian who is cruel to his people, and there being legitimate evidence of his being involved in narco trafficking, the U.S.'s actions in Venezuela, the argument, the justifications that are being made about having dominion over this hemisphere, it sounds a lot like what you would hear from Xi when it comes to Taiwan, what you would hear from Putin when it comes to Ukraine. So how does the U.S. president go and make these arguments on behalf of Ukraine and Taiwan when he's essentially saying, you guys got to stay out of my backyard?
Well, I think the problem we have here, Boris, is that our own national security strategy seems to validate spheres of influence. It seems to imply, if not overtly state, that we, the United States, we have dominion in the Western Hemisphere. Russia, you get broader control in Europe. And China, you can have Asia. And it talks about that in a very colloquial 18th century, 19th century way, in a manner that we have not had in the United States, certainly not since World War II. And so for the Chinese, they can say, well, you did Venezuela, maybe we'll just do Taiwan. Anyways, it's in your national security strategy, isn't it? And that's the big fear about where we are right now.
Joel Rubin, appreciate the analysis. Thanks so much.
Boris.